Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast, coming to you from the Long Valley Studio in Washington, Utah. I'm your host, Dave Markel, and this is episode 189. This week's episode is something a little different, and honestly, it's unique to this show's format and incredibly important. I've got three returning guests joining me for a roundtable discussion. Tracy DeTomasi, CEO of Callisto, along with advocates Chris McGee and Derrick Hurley. All three are doing important work to change the conversations surrounding rape, sexual assault, survivor support, accountability, and the role men need to play moving forward. We talk about the upcoming Dudes and Dads campaign with Callisto, but this conversation goes way beyond fundraising. This is about culture. It's about why men often stay silent, why survivors frequently feel alone, and why men need to become active participants in solving this problem instead of distancing themselves from it. It's an honest, direct, and really important conversation, and I'm honored to have all three of them back on this show. So let's get to it. Here's Tracy, Chris, and Derrick. Hey, SAS listeners, this is an exciting episode. I have three guests with me in the studio today. First is Tracy DeTomasi. Tracy is the CEO of Callisto. Tracy's been on the show before, episode 74, and she's going to bring us up to date on what's going on with Callisto and a new project that's coming up. Tracy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Next, we have Chris McGee. Chris was one of my guests on episode 90, and the reason Chris was here, real sad story, but very exciting news in terms of what his project is. His daughter was raped by a cop, and Chris has been in the business since then of bringing justice to victims and survivors of rape and sexual assault, in that he's been doing a lot of work in getting some laws changed. So Chris, welcome to the show. It's good to have you back.
Good to see you, Dave.
Thanks. And then third is Derrick Hurley, and Derrick's episodes were episodes 125 through 128. His daughter was raped while at university by a cop also from out of the country. She was in Antigua, and she was raped by a cop that was there on vacation from England. Am I right?
Spot on.
Yeah. So welcome back to the show, Derrick. And I'm going to ask each of you to give us an update on how things are going with Callisto, Chris, with you and your work, and Derrick, with you and your work. It's just an honor and a pleasure to have all three of you here and do this roundtable. Tracy, can I start with you and have you talk about what is coming up in May?
Yeah. So again, thank you so much for having all of us here. So just to remind your listeners, since it was a while ago that I was on your show, Callisto is a national tech for good nonprofit, and we have built technology to help survivors find out if the person who harmed them has harmed anybody else without them having to publicly disclose. And so our technology is end-to-end encrypted. Anybody with a .edu email address in the US and its territories has free access, and a survivor can go on and create an account for free, and they put in the state where the assault occurred, and that's because laws vary by state. And then they put in a unique identifier of their perpetrator's information. So their perpetrator's social media handle, email address, phone number, whatever they have, and as many as they have. And that's what we use to match on. And so if two survivors put in the same Instagram handle, let's say, there's a match. They're not notified right away. It's not like a dating site. What we do is we assign that case to a confidential advocate who reaches out to the survivors separately to say there's been a match and did they want to meet. If the survivors choose to meet, it's free for them, and they get to go over their options, whatever their criminal options are, their civil options, their Title IX options, mental health, whatever the case may be. And then if it's safe to do so, and after going through the risks, that advocate will help connect the survivors if the survivors want that to happen so they can pursue healing and justice, whatever that means for them. We don't report to police, Title IX, or HR. We don't investigate what happens, and we are not a public database that anybody can sort through. In fact, I can't even look through the database. That's how encrypted it is. But we are really trying to get those survivors to be able to find one another without having to use the media, including social media, because it's not always safe to do so. And we know that on college campuses, 90% of sexual assaults are committed by serial perpetrators who on average offend 6 times while in college. And so we know that we can make a dent if we help survivors connect one another, because then that helps them heal. And a lot of survivors go on to report afterwards because they feel that strength in number. it's such a powerful tool. And so in the last year or two, since I was on your podcast last, really grown, and we've really increased the amount of people using the platform and the awareness out there. You know, our platform gets better the more people that know about it and the more people that use it.
Sure.
And so one of the things that we are really excited to do, which is why I'm excited to be here with all of you, because last year we had our first annual Dudes and Dads campaign. And this year we're going to kick it off in May. And I think what your listeners need to know is that when I've met each one of you individually, and I think I might have connected all of you at some point, I was going to say, I think I might be the connector here, but it was because you all just spoke so passionately about this, and you're making the change and you're making the activation. And this was never something that you anticipated your life's work to be, and you didn't want to be having these conversations, but you understand why it's necessary and why you didn't have the conversations before. And we want to inspire other men to do the same thing. And so last year I had this idea of men aren't always invited into this space, even though many are victims and survivors. Many have loved ones that have gone through it. And a lot of men just don't know how to enter this space. And sometimes I don't know that we always make that easy for them. So last year I said, hey guys, can we do a Dudes and Dads campaign where you help us fundraise for these life-saving services to help other people get to know that these exist? And all three of you said, absolutely. And it was a success. You know, we raised several $1,000s, which was amazing. And when I sent you the email a couple weeks ago that said, hey, do you want to do it again this year? I mean, within minutes, all three of you had responded and said, yes, absolutely. And so this year we're going to kick off the campaign probably around Mother's Day and run it through Father's Day to really get men, whether or not you have a daughter or a son that has been assaulted, whether or not it's been you that's assaulted, but if you just want to care about this issue of sexual assault is so much in the media right now with the Epstein files and everything else, that we need more men to get involved, and we need them to help spread the word. And we know that not everybody is really comfortable doing that. So we're going to help you out. We're going to give you the language to really do that. And you're going to have these, you know, all three of you amazing men show other men how to do this. And that's what I'm just really excited about, because we need more guys like you.
Well, I think, speak for the other two and myself when I tell you this is an honor and this is a privilege to be able to do what we're doing. Chris, what are your thoughts on that? Tell us about your concept of Dudes and Dads and what it is we should be doing.
Here's the thing, Dave. Really, all guys should be doing this.
Absolutely. Wow.
As Tracy said, doesn't matter if you have a child or a spouse or a partner who was assaulted. We all got moms, right? And mom was there for us, and this is an opportunity for us to be there. There are not enough men in this conversation. Obviously, Derrick and I were moved to get involved in this fight because we wanted to protect our child, and we wanted to make a change. But as Tracy said, she actually introduced Derrick and I, and it was funny because almost right away Derrick and I just really connected, and we talk now probably. I think it's been a little less frequently lately, just because we're both pretty busy. But we're talking there for every couple of weeks, and our conversations quickly moved from our advocacy work to I guess a more broad view of advocacy, and not just to address sexual assault and violence, but also how do we get more men involved? How do we get more men engaged in this fight? This sexual assault is not just a men's problem, but men are part of the solution, and guys need to be stepping up and calling out behavior. And one of the things Derrick and I often talk about is, guys will often say, I'm a good man, and that's great. What are you doing to demonstrate that? What is the behavior that says you're a good man? And so, yeah, I'm proud to be part of this. I'm honored to be in the company of the three of you, and let's get this thing going, and let's do something.
Spot on. Wow. Powerful stuff. Thanks, Chris. Derrick, you're sitting there all patient and quiet so far. Throw in your 2 cents about what Dudes and Dads is all about in your thoughts and processes of advocacy, and what made you want to be doing this again?
Well, Tracy said something when she was speaking that was for sure true. Is it's hard for men to know how to get engaged in this space. In fact, before things happened with my daughter, I just didn't. I was just ignorant, not intentionally. It's just how it was. Became pretty educated pretty quick. When something happens, that's what you do. And for me to get in the space, and I knew at some point I was going to leave my career and just get involved. And, I ended up, writing a book we've talked about before, but I really wrote the book. The main reason was to give me a tool to try to get involved, because I didn't know how to get involved. And I thought, well, it gives me some credibility. So that was my thinking getting into it. But as I've been into it, I'll just tell you, I started focusing a lot on safety, how to keep women safe, what tools are there out there. And I think that's important, because we'll never get rid of this. I like to see it go down a lot. But, there's certain tools that would be good probably for women and probably men too to have. But once I got in and started meeting people like Tracy, like Chris, like a lot of folks, there's so many folks in this. What I learned pretty quickly is they're almost all women. And, Chris was probably the only other guy, Dave, other than when I talked to you. I mean, us three, that was a long start for me, for men being involved. And I'm like, man, this is not good, because as Chris said, we go around and basically say men's the problem. And frankly, they are primarily the problem, but they can be the solution. Right. And that's what we got to focus on. So I will say, over the last probably year and a half, I've learned a lot about Callisto. I know what the product does. I watched a demo of it. And I'm a big fan of it. And I think it's a great tool for people. And primarily, I thought a lot about this recently, is so many victims of sexual assault don't report. I don't blame them for not reporting, by the way, because you have to weigh what you're about to go through, and do you think you can have success? And it's just, there's so many things about it that can make you not want to do it. Now, I completely get it. I would never try to convince somebody to do it if they didn't want to do it. But with Callisto's platform, it takes away the majority of those things about reporting. And we have so many he said, she said cases that never see the light of day. That's also one of the reasons people don't report. But what this does is it helps someone without telling people, without going through all the heartaches of repeating stories, of getting your perpetrator's information out there to see have they done it with someone else. Because there's a lot more power and a lot more confidence if someone else has the same perpetrator. And as Tracy said, this is very much a serial crime. And, I was listening to Jess Michaels this morning, and Tracy, I know you're a good friend of hers, and she was saying that she was an early Epstein survivor. I mean, really early one.
Yeah.
But she thought it was just her. And once all this stuff came out, she realized there were others. It gave her a lot of relief, because she thought it was her fault until she realized what he was doing. Mm-hmm. And that really stuck with me, because this is the life of a lot of folks that go through sexual assault. And they I think it's just you question yourself until you realize they're the bad guy. I didn't do anything wrong. And so I love the tool, because it helps you behind closed doors, maybe find an ally, and you can have a whole lot more power going forward if you choose to with another person. So I'm excited about the campaign. I was excited about it last year. And it's just really, for me, it also is a way to, in the proper way, kind of call men out and get them engaged. And I think from doing it last year, my whole personal goal is to grow it beyond last year, and just try to keep spreading this to more and more men. That's my hope.
Thanks, Derrick. And it's a great hope. And it's exactly along the lines of what I was hoping you would say in terms of where this needs to go. And I'll throw in my 2 cents worth in terms of what this show is all about. And I say it every week. First of all, we need to start by believing. And that's a huge issue, especially with men. They, for whatever reason, even if they aren't in that category of that small percentage of men who are sex abusers, sex assault perpetrators, they are not believers of most outcry victims and survivors. And we need to make sure we start by believing. We also need to normalize this conversation. And that's another huge part of this podcast and why I wanted to be a part of Dudes and Dads and have all three of you come back and talk about this. We need to talk about it more. And this podcast provides that platform. And I'm honored to be part of Dudes and Dads and do everything I can to push Callisto forward and help raise money for the cause. The thing that Derrick mentioned, Chris, you mentioned it, and Tracy, you started it, and that is that most offenders are serial offenders. And that number you named, Tracy, I think you said 6 perpetrations, is such a low guesstimate. I can tell you from my work and interviewing hundreds of perpetrators who will finally sometimes tell how many victims they've had. And I can tell you for many of them, it was in the hundreds, literally in the hundreds. This is such a huge problem. I think Callisto is an amazing organization, an amazing plan for helping victims and survivors do what they can to connect with other victims and survivors, provide each other support, but also help, like you said, Derrick, lessen that perpetration rate. If we can just bring down the prevalence rate, well, you're right. We'll never, ever get rid of all rape and all sex assault because there's some bad humans in this world. But what we can do is do what we're doing between the 4 of us and push this out even more by normalizing the conversation, starting by believing, and doing everything we can to raise money to help organizations like Callisto to help bring justice to victims and survivors. I'm glad you're here. So let's do this. What I'd like to do is have everybody open their mic. Let's just have a discussion and talk more about this, make it a round table, and talk between the 4 of us. What's going on that we are now doing to update our audience in what our advocacy work is and how things are going with that? Anybody start?
Well, I'll say this. It's really hard, and you don't get into this because you think it's going to be easy or fun. But
man, isn't that the truth?
yeah, I guess a little chip in you inside that says, let's try to go change some laws or international treaties, or start a nonprofit up. But you do this stuff because you feel it deep within you. And the one thing I got to say, Dave, is as Derrick had said, I was so grateful when Tracy connected me to Derrick, because you just kind of feel very alone in all this, and plus the fact that being a guy, that just adds another factor in all of this. And so it was great when Derrick and I got to talk, because now there's a dad, and we can commiserate together, and we can feed off of each other's ideas and things like that. And I am sure Tracy, who's been in this fight much longer, can talk about the importance of having community. And I know for myself, Derrick and I used to have standing calls on Friday afternoons, and I would look forward to them because it was just I don't have to talk about the trauma and all of that stuff because I'm talking with someone that gets it, and we can both be pissed off, and we can both be angry, and we don't have to dwell on it. So having friends and having a community is really critical for, I think, all the stuff that we do. There are some really hard days and some frustrating days, and so it helps to be able to get on a call with somebody who knows the fight just as well, and you can both commiserate and say, yeah, this sucks. Yep, okay, well, tomorrow's another day. We're gonna try again. We're gonna keep pushing forward. So yeah,
That's so good. Tracy, you can talk about the difficulty of this because Callisto almost shut down a little over
We
a year.
did.
Yeah. And that's
Yeah,
why
yeah.
but yeah, talk about the hardships and where we've come.
I've been doing this work for 25 years in nonprofits, and I started my career working as a therapist for adolescent sex offenders, and I worked my first 15 years with boys and their families, and then I also helped create a program to get men involved in this conversation, and it's always been difficult. And people don't want to talk about it, and if you can't talk about it, you can't fundraise for it, and you can't support the mission. And so it's like, oh yeah, that's that thing over there. I don't want to think about it. Either I'm a survivor and it's too hard for me to think about and I really just don't want to bring it up, or I know that my daughter is a survivor and I don't want to think about her pain or how I did or did not protect her. In these cases, there's nothing that Chris or Derrick could have done to protect their daughters. Absolutely nothing. It was the responsibility of the perpetrator. And because this conversation, because talking about sexual assault is so taboo and so challenging, it's just easier to say, I'm not going to talk about it. And again, that impacts fundraising. And that is why so many sexual assault organizations in this last year or two have really either had to cut back their funding or had to cut back their programs and because of funding cuts. And we were no different. Luckily, we had survivors finally say, you're not closing, not on my watch, because when something goes away, that becomes a crisis. And that's when people want to talk about it.
Yeah.
That gives them permission to talk about something that they didn't know. Should I enter the conversation? Should I not enter the conversation? Out of the times that I've done this work with men, whether they're survivors or not, they're worried about making mistakes, and you're going to make mistakes. I still make mistakes. There are still things that I say that either my coworkers call me out on, my colleagues call me out on, or I call myself out on, and that I find something, I have to stop saying it that way. And I've changed my language along the years because it evolves and we learn things. And Maya Angelou, when you know better, do better. And I think that is the thing. When men enter this conversation, you are absolutely going to make mistakes. That is okay. And that is welcome. And I think when you have that community that Chris is talking about, you don't have to worry about the mistakes as much because you know that you'll get feedback and say, hey, maybe don't say it this way, say it this way, but you're still part of this community.
Right.
And you get to ask those questions in a way that isn't on an online forum or in the comment section and are angry about the mistakes because they're hurting because they're survivors. So I think that we need this community of men to start talking about it because, I just last week watched the documentary on Netflix about the manosphere. And that's the kind of community that is taking over our young boys. If we don't have more men like you creating a community for the younger generations and for each other to have these conversations, as I think they're just so incredibly important and they're just so hard to have. But once you start having them, they're so easy to have. And you realize that they can be emotionally draining, but they're not as hard as we think that they have to be.
Yeah, that's so true. Derrick, you mentioned too that there's all these tips out there for women. I think men need some tips.
I love that.
On not only recognizing rape and sex assault for what it really is, but we need to stop holding women accountable for changing the culture, right?
It's all on the women. It's all on the women. And that's why I said when I started getting involved in the space and trying to meet people like Tracy and a number of nonprofits just to kind of introduce myself, can I be of any help? Every one of them was a woman. And it took me a long time to meet a man in the space. And, there's a few, right? And Chris and I probably have a lot of the overlap on the few men that we talk to. And, for me, There's been really nothing easy about it from the start. I mean, from the start of my daughter's case through. But I will say, I'm highly motivated in this. I just made a decision that when you recognize these things, that men aren't as involved as they need to be. In fact is, men are primarily the problem, yet they're not involved in trying to solve this. And that is something that both Chris and I facilitate some things, and try to let younger men, boys, high school age boys, understand some of these things. What it means to be an upstander, what consent means, how healthy relationships look.
Excellent.
And I love doing that because another guy in this that I became friends with, I don't know, probably a year ago, James Smith Williams. He used to work with Brenda Tracy. I don't know, Tracy, if you've met him yet, but he's just a super good guy. He played in the NFL. He was one that once I met him, we talked a lot in a short period of time. I was learning the things he had been doing in the space. I'm always learning because I hadn't been in it, but 2.5, 3 years. And James is the one that really got me thinking about, we need to talk to men. He had been doing it in college with Brenda Tracy and set the expectation. And I said, well, is that something you would want to keep doing? Because he's retired from football now. And he said, what we need to do is get the younger kids. And he actually met Brenda when he was playing football at NC State, which happened to be my alma mater. And that's a little bit how we got connected. But he said some people like himself took to it right away. So did a handful of others. But some of them, they're already on their own path of what they're doing, good, bad, or ugly. That's just what it is. And he says, I feel like we need to talk to younger men, young men, because their brain's still developing. You can have more influence because they're younger. And if we can get them there going forward, then perhaps they can be better men. And so I really embraced that. And by the way, I'm not the youngest man, but James is about half my age. He was teaching me a bit, but anyway, I really believe that's a lot of what we have to do. And I mean, I try as much as I can to talk to young people. And at first it was a little difficult because, as Tracy said, it's not always easy to talk about it when you're new in it. You're trying to get over a hump. I don't know, Chris, if you had that experience, but after I had done it a little bit, all of a sudden I'm love to go do it. I don't turn down anything where I can go talk to people or get on a call or whatever, because it's just important. It matters to me. That's the thing. It is, like Chris said, it's kind of in your bed, in your soul. And I get this question all the time when I tell people. I mean, I do a variety of things. Anytime I can help a nonprofit or an organization of some sort, I jump in and do it. And I basically, people ask me, what are you trying? What's your goal? What are you trying to accomplish? And I said, it's pretty simple. I want the needle for sexual assaults to move the other way. It doesn't have to be significant even, but I like to see it going the other way before I die. Yeah. That's kind of seems like not a hard goal, but we all know that's a hard goal.
Yeah. So good. Chris, what does your work involve? Tell us what you've been doing since you've been on the show and how things have changed in your world because of this Dudes and Dads effort and your work in advocacy.
So I've had a good year. Last summer, the bill that I had been pushing in Pennsylvania to upgrade sentencing guidelines for mandatory reporters that hurt children was passed and signed into law. So that was a win.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. There's still so much work to be done, and like Derrick said, the truth of the matter is that we're not gonna win this fight anytime soon. And so I took a couple months off, and I sat back and I enjoyed the fact that we got a law in Pennsylvania, and then I was like, okay, what's next? And I am starting to look at bringing a predatory grooming law to Pennsylvania. And in fact, just today I was speaking with a lawmaker in Kentucky who just got a law passed, signed into law. Um, we'll see where it goes. The one thing that I've definitely learned through this process, it is a marathon. It is not a sprint. It is not going to happen quick. And you have got to, you got to be able to step back a little bit from the emotion of it. And it's funny, we're talking about Brenda Tracy. So I was speaking with Brenda last year at the Avawi conference, and the bill had just been amended, and it was gutted, and I was very frustrated. And she talked about the fact that you got to focus on incremental wins, that
Mm-hmm.
you get everything all at once, and she's right. And I, I saw a little bit of progress. I'm not sure the needle moved, but it moved a little bit, and we're gonna do it again. But it's gotta. There's something within that really makes me want to be part of this. And like Derrick was saying, guys just have got to step up. And I find what I'm getting really excited about is getting guys to be part of the conversation and to normalize this stuff. This bullshit of society saying, well, what were you wearing? Or, how much alcohol did you have to drink? Or some of that stuff.
Now we're getting into rape culture stuff that I
yeah.
all the time. Yeah.
And where does that come from? Where we are all part of that. We are all part of that when we allow those questions to be raised, when somebody floats that out there as if somebody getting drunk to the point where they pass out is justification for being raped. Somebody's got to be calling it out. And I hate the fact that guys are celebrated. Derrick and I are being celebrated because, and you, Dave, because, we're actually willing to stand up and talk about doing the right thing. What the hell? I mean, that's
It's a low bar.
ridiculous. Tracy's been doing this for 25 years.
Right.
And she's
Right.
kind of like, well, welcome to the party, gentlemen.
Yeah.
But
I'm going to welcome you with open arms and recognize that, you all need to recognize that there's been some of us that have been here for a while, but we always have more room,
It's never too late. And you're right. There's always
never too late. It's absolutely never too late.
So Tracy, what can dudes and dads do? What do we need to do in terms of helping Callisto with your project, with this mission? How can we directly impact what Callisto's doing?
Talk to other dudes and dads, because I've done a lot of work trying to talk to men, and I've been fairly successful at it. I went and did like a speech maybe 8 years ago in front of 1,800 U.S. Army soldiers. Some really loved it, some really hated it.
Mm-hmm.
If a man was on stage, it would have been received differently.
Yeah.
You all can talk to other men in different ways. They are going to talk to you and respond to you differently. And so to all the men in your audience, or to all of the women who want their husbands or sons or brothers to be involved, their friends, they need to share this episode with them to get them to understand that this is really important. And I think that the part of the fundraising campaign, of course, is always to raise funds. Like, as a nonprofit, we're always making sure that we do that. But it also is a way to initiate a conversation with somebody else. And it is a way to spread the word about Callisto, about this tool, because, men use our tool too. And I think that is really, really key. And that just kind of sparked me to also think about this stat where so many times when I talk to men and they're in the room and I'm like, yeah, you're probably really worried about your daughters after I talked. And they're like, absolutely. I don't want them to leave my house. And then I said, and you're probably also worried about your sons, but you're worried about them getting falsely accused, right? And they're like, yeah, I don't want my son to be falsely accused. And I said, your son has a greater chance of being sexually assaulted while they're in college than they do of being falsely accused when they're in college.
Spot on. Right.
And so you're doing this for both, like any gender child that you have. And I think that is really important. But the fact that dudes and dads can have this conversation. And I also think that it's really important to understand how hard it could be, not necessarily knowing the words, but getting the rejections. And I think, I don't remember if it was Chris or Derrick or one of you last year was like, I thought it was going to be a lot easier than it was, to ask for money and then to get rejected and to be shocked of how many people won't even give 5, 10, 20 bucks
Right.
to this cause. And they just completely ignore your outreach because they don't want to talk about it.
Right. Man.
I try to guilt them if I can.
Yeah. Why not?
Whatever way.
Whatever it takes. Whatever it takes.
What for me, and last year was the first time we did it, so it's a little bit of a learning curve. But I tried what it gives us, and I asked Tracy, can we maybe have a little more runway, which is for Mother's Day. Let's take care of our moms, but then let's jump on it because it gives us a little more time. Because if you're reaching out and using social media and those things, it might take more than once because sometimes people miss the first time it goes through their feed, and so you need some reason to come back. And I like that and then I start reaching out to individuals at a point because I know enough people and I know enough that have daughters even that I think I can convince them they need to be participating. And so I tried different things the first year. I'll go into it a little bit more, having done it for a year, I'll go a little more, probably slightly more aggressive. It's all for good. And I want to see some of these people, and I know some good men, and I know they are. And I need to figure out the things that resonates with them to get them engaged. Because if I can learn those traits, it might work on other men. So it's a little bit of a challenge to me, to be honest. Of the giving, everybody's going to make their decision how much they're comfortable giving. All that's fine. But what I'm trying to find out is what hits the heartstring, what makes a difference to get someone involved to give something. If they give something now, they probably can give more the next time or get more involved. And that's how I'm trying to look at it. Again, it's just the second year, but it's for such a good cause. I mean, I believe in the cause, and I believe in the opportunity to engage men about the cause. So it's just a win-win.
Tracy, what other things?
And I
I
think,
love it, Derrick. I'm not trying to minimize what you're saying. That's huge, and I love it. And I think being more aggressive and taking an assumptive approach instead of trying to please, and let's try and do better. I think we need to be aggressive. Tracy, I cut you off. What were you going to say? And then I have a question for you.
no, yeah, go ahead and ask a question.
Well, I'm just wondering when this program really kicks off, what can we three do in addition to talking to other men, in addition to asking for money? Can we maybe make a little pact between the three of us to call me or sit down with a recording device and record something that I can throw in on the show as a pre-announcement, a mid-break announcement, or a post-show announcement about what's going on, about what we're doing, about keeping this drive going, not just between now and Father's Day, but all year long. What can dudes and dads do? And would that be something that would help?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that the power in networking for us is huge because again, the more people that know, the better. And if you hear from somebody that you love and that you're going to trust us more. And so if Derrick tells somebody about us, they trust Derrick, so they're going to trust us. If I, as a random CEO, say, hey, you should trust my organization, they're going to be more skeptical, right? And so I think the more that we can do to continue to talk about it, because the first time you hear about something, you don't usually take action.
Yeah.
The second time you're like, oh, wait, what was that cause again?
Mm-hmm.
What was Chris talking about last year? He must really be into this if he's doing it again this year. And you think about any kind of fundraising event, whether it's for Alzheimer's, whether it's for ALS, whether it's for cancer. Maybe you don't donate the first time your friend comes asking, but you're like, wow, why is this so important to them? And so, I mean, obviously, Chris and Derrick and you, Dave, have all really dedicated your lives now to doing some kind of advocacy. But there are people in your lives that could dedicate 1 month a year to do this one thing. And again, giving is important, and it's also the lowest bar that you can do, right? Like giving $50 is probably the lowest bar that you can do because that's important and we need that. Giving $50 a month is another step. Giving more if you have more to give, and then also talking to others about it. And I just think that that is so important because men hold a lot of the power in this country. And
Yeah.
so you might know somebody in your network that could really make a difference. They could get us on some major paper or some major podcast. Not that your podcast isn't fantastic, Dave, but like to get on Joe Rogan, to get on something where more dudes and dads are listening that really care about this topic and to get them to know about it. I think that at some point I probably talked to all of you about, I think about a story with my own dad, and he's 80 years old now, but years ago when I was about 30, I told him about a boy when I was 12 years old grabbing my breast on the bus. And I told him that story because that man happened to be at my family Easter egg hunt. And I was like, what is that guy doing here? And I grew up in a very small town. And my dad got so mad. Why didn't you tell me that? And I was like, because you're reacting like this when I'm 30. How would you have reacted when I was 12? We kept that from him because he always said, if I know anything, I'm going to kill him.
Yeah.
And I know that that's what so many dads want to do. And it comes from a place of love and good intention. And it keeps us from telling you. It keeps us hidden. And so I think for generations prior to mine, and then even part of mine is that we've kept men out of this conversation and we've saved them. And I remember years ago when I lived in Nashville, I talked to Sean Henry, and he is the CEO of the Nashville Predators, which is the hockey team. Other than it being the worst team name in history to do gender-based violence work and partner with, Sean was amazing. And I remember one of the first conversations that we had with him, and we told him that 1 in 4 women experience domestic violence, 1 in 5 women experience sexual assault. And he's like, okay, I don't know about this. And he went back and he asked his wife and his sisters and the people he worked with, the women he worked with, and he came back to us and he goes, your numbers are wrong. It's 1 in 2. Where do I sign up?
Right. Man, spot on. Yeah.
And he was amazing. And when he got in a room and he talked about it, he didn't always know the right words to say, but men listened to him because he had influence. He had influence in the community, and men have influence into their social networks and into their communities, many times in ways that women don't have. And that's just so important.
Chris, what are your views on what's been said so far, but also the education process moving forward? How can we get more men educated like this coach was?
I think that one thing that I need to really underline what Tracy was just sharing was this idea of guys are not always going to get it right. Good Lord. I mean, the number of times that I have gotten things wrong, whether it was as a dad or husband or a son, whatever. Does that mean that I stop? Does that mean that I don't continue to push forward? Yeah, I screwed up. Said the wrong thing. I didn't say what I should have said, whatnot. And fear of not knowing what to do is not an excuse. The truth of the matter is, yeah, there is a little bit of putting yourself out there. Sometimes you got to do the scary things, but the stuff worth doing is typically there's that element of scariness to it. Honestly, Dave, I don't know if there's any secret sauce to this, if there's any magic formula. I really feel like the key to this is getting guys to talk about it and say, this is not okay. There is a human on the other side of this. There is it is impacting people. So your words hurt. You got to take responsibility for that. And Derrick and I was able to introduce Derrick to Alex Prout from I Have the Right To. And so that was another one. The three of us getting on a call, and it was the same thing. It was like kindred spirits. We're all we didn't need to talk about what brought us together. What we talked about was what we wanted to do. And Alex is so fantastic about leading this charge and just putting it out there. And the last time I saw Alex, he was telling me that he and his wife Susan are not fun at parties because this is what they talk about. And you know what? We need to be talking
I
about
say
this
that
stuff.
all the time. It's like, I'm
Yeah.
not a great dinner party guest. It starts with,
And
what do you do? And then I tell them, they're like, oh, this is kind of got real dark real quick.
Yeah, I got that a lot when I was traveling around and teaching and would be on an airplane. Somebody asked me, what do you do? And I say, I teach about sex assault and rape. What? Yeah, how to investigate it better, how to prosecute it better, how to get the word out better, that we need to do something about it. But yeah, that kind of turns people off right up the bat if you don't say something right, right off the bat about what it is that you do. And all three of you are doing public speaking. Am I correct on that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put out an invitation to all my listeners that when you need a public speaker, get a hold of me and I'll get you in touch with Tracy DeTomasi, Derrick Hurley, or with Chris McGee, because all three of them are out there doing the work, right? And we need to do more of this. Absolutely. And I'm available too. I would love to travel wherever anybody needs me to travel and talk about this.
Hey,
And, one of the things I would love, go ahead, Derrick.
I'll just say this real quick because I started. Chris has done a phenomenal job getting a law passed. That is so hard. It is so hard, and so I mean, it's just incredible. But what we've got to understand is we have a lot of issues with our laws, and if we can't get men more engaged, how do we change laws? I mean, at a big level, there is no other crime like this.
Nope.
There's no other crime like it.
No.
And it's just piled in there with all the other crimes and, there's statutes and all the things around it. Prosecution rate's horrible, everything about it. And it's because of the crime itself in the characteristics of it. And we need, because as Tracy said, men have a lot of power in the country and we need men engaged and we need to change some of that stuff. It is so messed up. For some reason I get engaged in this conversation a lot because people ask me about this, and we were fortunate enough. Ours was not in this country though to get a conviction on the perpetrator on my daughter, but the laws make it so difficult, and this is the other reason I'll take that and go right back to Callisto and their tool. It actually gives you a lot more power, whether you take it forward with the police or not. I think it's because you have an ally. It's just like Chris said when we started talking, there's another guy. You can talk about this. And it kind of just you can relax a little bit more is how it makes you feel. But think about victims and they don't talk to anybody. And now they've got someone with potentially the same perpetrator and then they can talk. And as you know, I think all of you know, in trauma-informed support, peer support's key.
Absolutely.
So I don't know. I want men to get involved for a lot of reasons. One, if they're involved, they're probably not causing the problems. But as I think a little longer term, we need some people that will get engaged that can help us drive more changes to the law because we are not doing our victims justice at all.
Yeah.
Sorry, Tracy, you can go now.
No, I think that was really important. I'm glad that you got to say all of that. Dave, I would love to kind of put out a challenge to some of your listeners, and that is one, if you want to create your own campaign when we start this, please reach out to development@projectcallisto.org. We are happy to give you information about all of that. But I think, some of the things that I talk to you about women for ideas is to host a dinner. And I think men are probably a little bit more hesitant to do this. But I think that creating that community among your friends to be able to talk about this, particularly if you have teenage children or college age children, to say, how do you talk to your kids about this? How are you talking to your sons about it? How are you talking to your daughters about it? And have a dinner. And if you think that you can raise a minimum of $10,000 at this dinner and you want to invite me, I will go to wherever you're at and I will participate and I will help you educate yourselves and your children on how to have these conversations, because I just think that it is so important to do this. And I want to make sure to open up that group of men to say, this is our safe space to make mistakes about this. And I will help educate on some of those mistakes. And again, you're going to continue to make mistakes, and that is absolutely okay. Because you're just going to, like Chris said, you got to keep doing it. And you feel the fear and you do it anyway. And I know that men know that, like, they push through so much fear in so many ways. And this is just another thing to push through fear. But having more men involved in having these conversations. So one, it gets taken off of the moms to be the only one educating. Because if your son is only hearing this from his mom, then they're not hearing the whole side of it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's only so much as women we know the pressures of being man. We don't know all of that. I would love to get one of your listeners to really dive into this and to create that community within their community.
Yeah. I'm going to throw this out there. It's because of you three and other people that are like you who speak out about this in really strong, powerful ways that my show is growing. And I'm really thrilled about that. Yeah, I don't have Joe Rogan's numbers yet, but that's a yet.
Yet.
I started off with about 400 listeners a month almost 4 years ago. And now I'm pushing close to 6,000 listeners a month.
Wow.
And it's still growing. And it's because of shows like yours. Your episodes are still bringing in great listeners that tell other people about your episodes. And so it's an exponential growth because people hear it, they tell other people about it, they listen to that episode from you, Derrick, Tracy, Chris, and other people want to hear those stories. And so absolutely, I would love my listeners to take Tracy up on that challenge. And we guys, we may not throw a dinner, but we can throw a football party, a football watching party. We can throw a basketball watching party.
We could grill out.
We can grill.
You can throw a barbecue.
Yep.
We can definitely do that.
And we can always
a whiskey tasting. We could do it with whiskey too,
Oh, now you're onto something.
Or we could do a UFC watching show, party. Right, Derrick? Get the UFC in there.
I mean, yeah, I could do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I kind of see that in the background, and I remember you talking about that. Yep. Yeah. There's an opportunity, and even if we just spend 10 minutes talking about the prevalence rate of rape and sexual assault and what we can do to help make an impact in that, and how Callisto works, and how giving $50 to Callisto could change an awful lot for an awful lot of victims and survivors. And it's not just women survivors. Like you said, it's anybody with a .edu email address can be a part of this. And we're encouraging that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, don't everybody talk at once.
So the one thing that I will say, that the worst part about this fundraising campaign was the fact that Derrick made more money in his campaign than I did. And believe me, Derrick, that didn't go unnoticed. So I'm Tracy, I'm sorry. The reason I'm doing it this year is because I have to do better this year than
I love it.
So yeah, it's on, brother.
The challenge has been laid down.
Yeah, that's right.
Here.
That's
Derrick,
right.
are you accepting this challenge?
Everybody.
Let's do it.
Oh, that's funny.
Well, some closing statements. Derrick, let's start with you.
Yeah, no. First, thanks, Dave, for having us on. This is an important topic, and Callisto's an outstanding nonprofit doing some really good work. Obviously, we all believe in it. That's why we're here. So I just encourage any of the listeners to be on the lookout, and let's go make this thing successful.
Yeah,
I know we will.
Chris?
We all have a role to play in this, and whether it is getting a law passed or speaking out or something like that, or if it's even just supporting a loved one who has suffered something, we all have a responsibility. And so this is a time when all of us need to step forward to be part of it. If you're not happy with something, do something about it. But don't just stand on the sidelines. I'm glad to be part of this. Obviously not glad that we have to be doing this sort of thing, but here we are. And so I'm up for it, and I'm just going to keep it going, and being able to hang with people like y'all on this call, it keeps me going through this fight.
Yeah, thanks. And Tracy, I'm going to let you have the last word on this.
Well, first of all, gratitude. I just have such immense gratitude for all three of you. And anytime I send you an email or have a crazy idea, you're always like, yep, let's do it. And I just want to continue to express gratitude to all of you. And I think, if people have been listening to the news cycle with the Epstein files and you hear all of that and you're like, what can I do? This is something that you could do because we're trying to prevent the next Epstein. And I think that we can do it, where we can connect somebody and get a perpetrator held accountable while they're in college before they become a very powerful billionaire. And all of this stuff that we're seeing with the Epstein files, there's a microcosm in every community of that same level of power. It might not be as big or as global, but it's there. And in every community, and we have the power to stop it. And Callisto is one of the tools that we can stop it. And we are working every day to expand beyond colleges. I know that that's a question that we get often. And so this support will help us get to do that faster as well.
Yeah,
and so again, thank you all. Thank you, Dave, for having us on your show. Thank you, Chris and Derrick, for continually spreading the word about Callisto and doing all of the amazing work that you do, even beyond Callisto, and passing laws and doing talks and all of that, because it's just so incredibly important.
Yeah, thank you. Tracy, give that website address one more time so people can donate.
Yep. It is projectcallisto.org. There will be a donate button in the corner that you can hit, and you can find out different ways to give and how to get involved. And if you want more information, you can email development@projectcallisto.org.
Great. Tracy, Chris, Derrick, thank you so much for spending this time with me and with my audience and getting the word out about Dudes and Dads and Callisto. It's been an honor to have each of you here, and I appreciate you more than I can say.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, stay in touch and drop me a line, and I'll throw it on the show. Anytime you guys want to say something, we'll get it out there. I'll see you later.
That does it for another episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. I want to thank Tracy DeTomasi, Chris McGee, and Derrick Hurley for joining me in this really important conversation. One of the biggest takeaways from this episode is something I say often on this show. We have to normalize this conversation. And part of normalizing it means men stepping into the discussion instead of avoiding it. It means challenging harmful attitudes, supporting survivors, educating young people, and refusing to stay silent simply because the topic makes people uncomfortable. Organizations like Callisto are doing incredibly important work in helping survivors connect safely and privately, especially in cases involving serial offenders. If you'd like to support the Dudes and Dads campaign or learn more about Callisto, please take a few minutes to check out this episode's notes, then visit Callisto's website and get involved. Please let others know about this episode, and please do what you can to help bring justice to victims and survivors of rape and sexual assault. A great way to do this is to start by believing. Together, we can help normalize the conversation about the realities of sexual violence, because we all know someone whose life has been impacted by rape or sexual assault. We'll see you next week.